So Xiaomi's new 12 series is out. We have the 12 Pro, the 12X, which I don't currently have, and then this model, just the 12. Now the 12 is a 6.28-inch model, compact flagship, smaller, very comfortable size. In-screen fingerprint reader, 120 Hz screen. It is an AMOLED screen, over 1000 nits of brightness. We've got a 50 megapixel camera on the rear, 13 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel macro. Spec-wise, looks really good. Powered by the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 from Qualcomm, latest and greatest, 4 nanometers. But as I discovered in using this, and you'll see later on in the review, that it has a bit of a serious problem, and it's just like the Snapdragon 810 days, unfortunately. Now, just to point out before we get started here that this is an import model, okay? It's meant for the Chinese domestic market, and we are still waiting for the global release at the time of this video. As a result, there is no LTE band 20 on this. So yes, I did buy and import this one. I used a company called Trading Shenzhen. They are very good. I've used them for a long time. Much better than those dodgy AliExpress sellers that can be very hit and miss. So inside the box, you'll find a clear TPU case. We get a Type A to Type C cable. Our charge is 67 watts. It will take about 38 minutes. And then you do get the typical kind of paperwork here, all in Chinese, of course, being an import model, and a SIM tray tool. Now, really nice build quality and finish to this phone. So obviously I've got the blue color here. Now it is about 8.2 millimeters, the thickness. That's not measuring the cameras here, which then bring it up to about 9 millimeters or 9.5 or so. And then the weight, well, officially they say it's 179 grams. According to my scales, it's about 183, which is still very, very good. So matte finish here with this Gorilla Glass Victus on the back, and I think it looks stunning. So curved edge right here. Volume up and down, and then power buttons made out of metal frame around the outside. It is a super solid build, and it's typical Xiaomi quality now that we've come to expect, that it has an excellent finish. This is just as good as any of the big name brands like an Apple or Samsung. You get the idea there. So looking at the front here, fingerprint reader in a very low location. Now, I wish it was up a little bit higher like the Pro model that I have here. Full review of that one's coming too, by the way. So if you tap on the screen, you can then simply wake it up. Unlocking speed's pretty good, although the animation makes it look a little slower than what it really is. Bezels here around the outside, I don't think they're too bad, but it's not quite symmetrical the way they have done this edge here. Now, I don't know if they do that to stop damage to the screen with drops or maybe a little bit more added protection. I don't think it's too bad. Cut out here, so no under-display camera. A lot of people were disappointed in that. Me, I'm not, because I did find the under-display cameras to be very poor quality normally, even though the Mix 4 is probably about the best that there is. So Xiaomi has really good under-display camera tech. So, other things to point out. Curvature to the glass, and yes, it is an OLED screen, or AMOLED. 1 billion colors, 120 Hertz. Very good. I'll get more onto that very shortly. But when you do look at it at angles, you can see it shifts out just a little bit on the corner. Right up the top here, we have some Harman Kardon branding. That's because they do have the stereo speakers from them. They sound pretty good, and later on in the review, I'll give you a sample of them, of course, and compare it to this one right here, the 12 Pro. So IR transmitter, antenna lines you can see. Again, the camera module sticking out a little bit, but it's nothing like the 11 Ultra. Down the bottom here, we've got our Type-C port SIM tray, so it does take 2 nano SIMs, no micro SD card support. Microphone, antenna lines, another one of those speakers. Now, this is a bit of a letdown here. The Type-C port, it's only USB 2.0 spec. Still, I mean, come on, Xiaomi. Why are we not USB 3.1? Why no video out display support? That would be really good to have, and it is definitely well overdue there. Now, the back of it with the cameras there, so dual tone LED flash, main 50 megapixel camera there, and then we've got a 13 megapixel ultra wide and 5 megapixel for macro. Now, I do like this. I like the fact we don't have any silly 2 megapixel cameras here. I hope this trend continues. And then that camera here in the cutout, this one's 32 megapixels, the same as the Pro model. So the Xiaomi 12, a little bit smaller than the Pro model here. That's because it is 6.28 inches. This one being the Xiaomi 12 Pro, a 6.73 inches. You can see the camera module slightly larger there, and I really do like this matte black finish here. It looks stunning. And the screen, so the 6.28 inches, it only needs Full HD Plus. That's all it's got. If you want the Quad HD, then you go for, of course, the Pro model. And you do see a slight sharpness to it, but really at normal viewing distances, I can tell you now that most people will not be able to distinguish the difference between Quad HD and Full HD Plus. You're just not going to be able to see it there. So if we had a look at the settings, there are a few options that we get in here, typical from Xiaomi. So anti-flicker mode is there and obvious, which with the 12 Pro isn't. It's in the developer options for some reason. And I do find that this one suffers from banding a lot more, mostly on camera compared to what we see here with Xiaomi's. And you'll see that there's sunlight mode too there as well that you can set up, and the reading mode, color modes, all that kind of standard stuff that we get with them, which is really great. Now, refresh rate here, you can set it to either 60 or 120 hertz. The good thing about the Pro model is you get the in-between perfect kind of balance, which is 90 hertz, which I actually do prefer for, of course, fluidity, yet you do get that battery saving. Sadly, missing on this model here, but it is a very good screen, flickers less than the 12 Pro model, and absolutely nothing wrong with it. So can you distinguish the differences with the screen compared to, say, the Xiaomi 11? Not really. They look, both of them, stunning. You can't see the difference between the 10-bit to the 12-bit. You get the idea. It's got Dolby Vision too as well with it. Now, in direct sunlight, it fares fine, okay? You can see right now, you can still make it out, but not quite as good as the 1500 nits peak that you get on the 12 Pro. This one is 1100 nits, but still definitely sufficient and great screen. Now, of course, powering this beast here is the new Snapdragon 4 nanometer. It's the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. It's quite a hot chip. If you didn't see my previous video, it can heat up, and I'll get more onto that later on, especially when you're gaming. It will. And 8K video can record only 6 minutes because of heat constraints, I think, not the storage constraints. So UFS 3.1, very quick. But what about the UI performance? MIUI 13 now. Now, normally when you swipe down toggles, very quick. I have the apps drawer enabled. Normally pretty quick. But why am I saying normally? Well, that is occasionally waking it up. I have just seen now and then lag for a second. I mean, that was very quick. But just one time or 2 or 3 times now, I've seen just a little loading icon before the icons came up. This MIUI 13 to me seems a little bit of a beta. Now, certain applications like Play Store, when you get into it, it doesn't seem smooth. It seems to stutter. Twitter is exactly the same. The scrolling performance is absolutely terrible on this phone so far. Other issues I've seen are that sometimes in some of the system apps of Xiaomi's, that when you go to type in, you can't see where you're typing with the on-screen keyboard. I don't know if it's because I'm running Gboard and not the Xiaomi keyboard, but still it shouldn't be happening. Jump into Twitter here and you'll probably see what I mean, that when you scroll here, it's not loading lag, it's just the way it scrolls, even at 120 hertz, it could be better. It could be smoother. It's just a bit janky at times and really not too happy with that. Now, triggering gestures works most of the time really well. And overall, don't get me wrong, it's a very fast, quick, snappy phone, as you'll see now from the benchmarks. So at the time of this review, I am, of course, on the latest update. Now, this is a big update that came through that was meant to improve stability, security, and optimize system performance. But as mentioned, I'm still seeing issues. It still feels like a bit of a beta ROM at the moment, like we're kind of guinea pigs. Hopefully they'll sort it all out when the global version is released, and with the Chinese ROM, I'm sure that they're going to fix it eventually, of course, with updates. So charge time, 38 minutes to go from 11% to 100. Very quick, not quite as fast as the 20 minutes you get with the 12 Pro. So I don't have LTE band 20. Big problem here for a lot of people in Europe. That's, of course, what happens when you import a Chinese model. If you get the global version when it eventually comes out, you won't have this issue. But I did get on 5G and got, well, typical kind of speeds for my carrier. Now, really good Antutu scores here, almost reaching the million point mark here. Where's the big jump? So it's actually the GPU, but it's at short bursts only. What happens is later on gaming, it drops right down too as well. If I keep running this test, it eventually drops and it will probably end up overheating. And I'll show you more about that soon. So a wildlife score here, just to show that that GPU, yes, is very potent. Getting almost 60 frames per second average is excellent. It's not the extreme test, but wildlife, it's still quite a demanding test there. Now, internal storage UFS 3.1, I have 128 gigabytes of it, and we're getting really good speeds here. Look at this. That's probably faster than most people's SSDs in their laptops. I'm pretty sure it would be. For a lot of people, they're still running SATA 3, of course. really good, okay? That's not going to slow down the system at all. Geekbench 5 score, very good, okay, for what it is, for the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. And GPS works well, very good here. You can't get any better accuracy than 3 meters. That's the Qualcomm cap there. But it does see just so many satellites. You can see 77 in view and used 41. So that's excellent there. Now, on to screen kind of use, screen on time. So with this average kind of my own use here, I can achieve almost 7 hours. Now, that's a lot of Twitter, a lot of using the camera, which is fine, I guess, at 120 hertz, but really should be a bit better. I'm a little disappointed about that. Now, if you run a fixed test at 60 hertz, it would actually go for a really long time then, the battery life. You can see it went for 14 hours, which is kind of crazy. Real world use, you're looking probably then 10 hours if you lock it down to 60 hertz. So if you need that battery life, highly recommended just to cut that refresh rate in half. You gain so much more. You gain an additional about 3 hours of real world use. Audio now. So if you want to use a 3.5 millimeter setup, okay, your headphones, earphones, whatever, you need to use an adapter for that. And it does sound really good. Typical Xiaomi, good quality there. Now the speakers, both of them Harman Kardon. Now what I've discovered is that the Xiaomi 12, even though it doesn't really make sense, it's smaller, shouldn't sound better, but it does sound slightly louder than the Xiaomi 12 Pro, which I'll give you a sample of shortly. But I just wanted to point out that we're running at 30 hertz refresh rate in this normally, and then it jumps up to 60. But sometimes the scrolling in here doesn't quite feel like 60. At least it's not too obvious on the Xiaomi 12, but probably more on the Xiaomi 12 Pro at the moment. It just sometimes feels a little stuttery, like not as smooth as it should, which is just one of my complaints there with the firmware. Anyway, enough of that. What I'm going to do is play a track here, my typical track, at 100% volume on both, and you'll probably hear, hopefully, that the Xiaomi 12 is actually a little bit louder. So that is really interesting that the Xiaomi 12 speakers sound better than the 12 Pro. Now onto the biggest area of criticism from me is gaming, not the performance. It's very good. I mean, really fast. You can use max settings here, extreme frame rate with PUBG, not a problem. The problem is, after playing demanding games or games with the highest settings that you think you'll be able to run with the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, right? 4nm chip, you know, it's the latest and the greatest. Well, it's like the Snapdragon 810. If you remember that one, very hot chip. So Qualcomm's back to its dark side of overheating chips. And what happens is I did a stress test here with 3D Mark, and that's the Wildlife Extreme test. It ran for only about 11-12 minutes before crashing and completely closing me out of the application or the game. For example, if you play Genshin Impact, the same thing would happen. Booted me out, overheating, message popped up, and that's it. It simply gets too hot, this chip. Very hot on the back of the phone. So if you intend to play games for long periods, demanding settings, and you're using a case as well, just expect this phone to just overheat super quick. And that is just simply unacceptable to me. Really disappointing from Qualcomm and Xiaomi. Moving over to our cameras now, so we've got a 32 megapixel sensor at the front here, same as the Xiaomi 12 Pro, the larger, more expensive model, and you can shoot 1080p, that's it. So 1080p 30 and 60 maximum. There is electronic image stabilization. I'm really sad to see we still don't have 4K with front-facing vlog footage. I think they are falling behind here, Xiaomi. They need to get up with the times. Other manufacturers for years now have had 4K with the front-facing cameras. So just like the Xiaomi 12, I noticed that especially with the vlog footage that you do get a lot of this. It just looks simply too bright. It's being overexposed and they're not really balancing this out too well. Other brands, other manufacturers tend to handle these kind of bright conditions a little bit better. It's simply software. Xiaomi just need to optimize these cameras a little. And I do find that throughout the cameras on the larger version, so the 12 Pro and this model here. So this is the main 50 megapixel camera. It has optical and electronic image stabilization. During the day, it's pretty much exactly the same, the video quality out of this that you will get from the Xiaomi 12 Pro. And I've done a comparison, so check my channel for the Xiaomi 12 Pro versus the 12. There's a camera comparison included in that goes over this. So the quality looks pretty good to me. The electronic and the optical image stabilization is excellent, and I'll just jog ahead. See Denya Castle there in the background. While it is 13 megapixels, I do find that the daylight footage, the 4K 30 that we can get, it won't shoot 4K 60, looks very similar to the 12 Pro, and even the photo is quite similar, but we don't have the as wide field of view that we do with the Xiaomi 12 Pro. Again, check out that comparison if you want to see the differences between the 12 Pro and this smaller 12 model. Okay, so final verdict on this one. There's a lot of good in this phone here. I love the frame around it, the Gorilla Glass Victus, the finish of it, the style of it, I think looks good. It is a high quality product, high quality screen, but then the failings that come through with the software in its current state feels very much like a beta to me, with some of that lag I'm seeing in certain apps like YouTube or Twitter. And even the Play Store seems just a little bit choppy, not smooth. It should be running a lot better than that. I'm not too sure what's to blame. It's not running at 120 frames per second. It runs at 60 Hertz with certain apps. And then of course it does dynamically scale that refresh rate with it. So the front-facing camera, still no 4K video. I mean, come on, Xiaomi, get up with the times. For years now, other brands have had 4K vlog front footage, okay? It's not too difficult to do that, but there we go. Optimization of the cameras I find to be disappointing, especially the front-facing camera. Always seems to be overexposed, face is too bright, video quality too as well. Oh, and don't get me started on that audio bit rate. 96 kilobits per second, yet again, they've gone backwards. We've gone backwards in some areas, we really have. Speaking of the performance too. So at short workloads, short bursts, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, it's very quick, it's fast, it's snappy, but long-term gaming, demanding games like Genshin Impact or even PUBG, when you put it onto the highest possible settings and you play the game for 30 minutes, this phone overheats. It runs into overheating problems, okay? It boots you out of the game, you'll lose the game. It puts up that message that I showed you, it's overheating. This to me is simply unacceptable. It's inexcusable, really. Now, who's to blame here? Is it Qualcomm? I think they're partly to blame, and Xiaomi too as well. Surely Xiaomi had their prototypes, tested games on them. Did they only game for 10 minutes? Game for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, overheats. How was that passed to be an acceptable design? Or was it Qualcomm? Did they simply not just lay out the plans for thermal solutions? Did they not set that in stone there, in concrete? Right, you need to have so much copper, thermal transfer pipes, you must have this to dissipate that heat. I can see the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 being a great chip in something large like a tablet where it can dissipate that heat, but in a smaller size compact flagship like this, simply too much. And it reminds me of the Snapdragon 810 days, if you remember those, and those chips just getting far too hot, not having sufficient cooling in them. It's just a repeat of that all over again. Very disappointed to see. So to me, this has potential, but Xiaomi's got time on their hands before the global release. Fix this, hopefully fix the thermals, fix that firmware, those bugs, give us hopefully 4K front-facing camera, improve the bitrate, improve the software in general, and then we might have a good phone. But to me, it feels like Xiaomi's lost their direction, their way a little bit. Too many releases. This is going to be, if you think about it, the Xiaomi 12 model number 3, if we count the 12 Pro and the X, number 3 of about 10, because we're going to have the T series, the T Lite, the 12 Lite, we're gonna have the 12X, the 12 Ultra, it just goes on and on and on. The Pro Plus, Ultra, it's just so many releases. I think they're really just flooding out too many models. People are getting confused. They're losing focus, losing direction, and it's showing. It's starting to show in the Xiaomi 12, sadly. So thank you for watching my, yes, long-winded review here, but now you know the full story of the Xiaomi 12.